The tech revolution is upon us, you may have heard. Quoted earlier this year at the World Economic Forum, talent required to manage, shape, and lead technology-driven changes underway will be in short supply, unless we take action today to develop it. Businesses will need to put talent development and future workforce strategy front and center. Firms can no longer be passive consumers of ready-made human capital. They require a new mindset to meet their talent needs. So we're here today to dig into this. I'm Angie Harrop, and I'll be moderating today's event through Bell and Ascend Canada. Thinking about this tech revolution in the context of talent and skills is important. How can we not only keep pace, but thrive? So let's get into it. We'll have some insight from important senior leaders with me today. Utpal Mangla from IBM, General Manager, Distributed Edge, Sovereign Cloud, and Partnerships. That's a lot of syllables. You win. Thank you. You've spoken extensively on the topic of technology and the future of work. So thank you for joining us today.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Angie.
Thank you. And my colleague, Anuja Sheth from Bell, Senior Vice President to Network and Technology Services, one of our most passionate champions for talent. I've got you again on stage later this week supporting our grads at the Grad Summit. Thank you and welcome.
Thanks, Angie.
And Rex Lee. So Rex Lee is our Chief Information and Technology Officer from Canadian Tire. A bit of a reunion for us, not to date us, but we go back, I think, to late 2000s, working on the earliest versions of employee collaboration tools. So Great to have you here. Great to see you.
It's great to be here.
Thank you. So some themes. We have impressive Pan-Asian leaders with us today. We have iconic brands on stage. Definitely 2 of 3 of you are vegetarian. Not sure about Rex. We have parents, I think between us 8 kids, right? Lots of college tuition being paid right now. Diversity champions and experts in tech. So thank you again. And welcome to our audience. So we're virtual today. Please feed us your energy and momentum and engagement through the chat and the Q&A, and we'll try to build that in. So let's get started. The broadest landscape for context. So Utpal, you're a master inventor with over 20 patents in cloud, telco, and 5G. Break it down for us. Make sense of the big shifts for us in technology.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Really appreciate it. And thank you, Anuja and Rex and Angie. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. At a very high level, I would say the 4 shifts that we are seeing in technology, and most of this would be obvious for you. First is AI. I mean, generative AI, how AI is having tremendous impact, and obviously the ChatGPT has made it a little bit more visible to everybody. So number 1, if I have to say, is AI.
Yeah.
The second one we like to call is hybrid cloud. We believe that the future is not going to be 1 or 2 clouds, but a multi-cloud environment. We like to call it a distributed cloud environment, where it's going to be some on hyperscalers, some on public, private, and even on-prem. The third one is automation. Automation. That's going to be absolutely critical. And the last one that we are very passionate about is quantum. We believe that quantum is going to have a tremendous impact as we go into the next 5-10 years. And I know I said 4, but then again, the 5th one I would say security.
Yeah.
Threat of security, cybersecurity, protection, at whatever levels you look at it, even from a consumer standpoint, end-to-end business standpoint, absolutely critical. So again, if I have to say, those are the 5 themes.
Okay, so I'm going to ask the question that I feel like some of our audience might be asking, quantum. Just give me one more bullet on that.
Absolutely. I think quantum, as most of you probably know, has supercomputers, the ability to compute. It's going to be 1,000s more time than that. And some of the big problems that are still not resolved today, we believe that quantum will have the ways to make it happen. For example, cancer. We're working, I mean, again, obviously I didn't want to mention this, but from an IBM standpoint, we're working, it's all public, with the hospitals trying to look into cancer. I think since we have some telco people over here, some of the cybersecurity, network threats, I think some of those which are not solvable today would be probably resolved through quantum technology. Still early days.
Fascinating. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so Rex, I'm going to turn to you. First of all, congratulations. Last year you were named Private Sector CIO of the Year. Incredible. I know that Bell and Canadian Tire have had a long-standing relationship, and you're going through lots of technological transformation as well, not just head office, but all your retail outlets for customers. Talk to us a little bit more about these shifts and its impact on your business.
Yeah, that's a big question,
Yeah.
and thank you on the recognition on CIO of the Year. I will say, I just get to be the face of that. It's really the team that does all the real magic. In terms of technology and what's happening, it is so transformative. Every single engagement, every interaction, every experience, from a customer perspective, from a business perspective, all of it is changing. And if you think things are fast now, I would tell you that it's never going to be this slow again. It's just getting faster and faster. And so what's going to happen from a customer lens is that expectations are going to continue to grow. And the need for someone to provide a service or an offering that they could do on their own, they could easily switch. If you're not there with some kind of strategic advantage, with some kind of value add, you're going to be irrelevant. And so it's forcing companies to think very differently about what they're doing, what their core differentiated values are. And a big chunk of that means that everything that can be digital will be. And the connected glue that will allow for this to really create these frictionless experiences is going to be data. Otherwise, you just get a series of fragmented experiences. And data, beyond just what is within an organization, will traverse across ecosystems. And so your experiences that you have are going to be very personalized, very unique. But there's a dark side to a lot of this as well. And you heard some of it when you start talking about data. So obviously privacy and cybersecurity. These are huge, huge concerns. And if you believe that everything's going to be digital and connected, your risk goes up. Likelihood of something happening goes up because everything now is an attack surface. And the impact of a world that is fully connected could be much larger as well. And so from a cyber perspective, not only are you dealing with the ransomwares that you see in the papers all the time, but now you have to deal with business disruption. And if you think about a cyber attack on drones, on robotics, you're talking about potentially human lives at risk as well. And so now we have to really rethink about cyber in an OT world, not just an IT world. And it's pretty scary. The other sort of big thing that we think a lot about is that the foundation of which most of this new technology, the Gen AI type work, the LLMs, and then the integration of a connected fabric of technology rests often on legacy systems and infrastructure. And so last year we saw some big catastrophic failures across North America. FAA fiasco and all flights being grounded, Southwest Airlines, people stranded in various countries. Closer to home, you saw the Rogers incident as well. And I'm not going to get into details of those, but when you read about them, they talk about maintenance updates and, they didn't see it as being as catastrophic, of course.
Right.
And they turn into these large sort of catastrophic. And that's a product of some of that foundational legacy technology and architecture and design. So when we think about how things are going to change and evolve, it's really exciting. Every function, every role will change. It's just a matter of how much. But we've got to think about a lot of the foundational components too to enable these things moving
what
forward.
I'm understanding is you've got this sort of foundation. I mean, Bell, for example, is like 147 years old, right? I hope I got that right. And you've got legacy infrastructure, and then you're adding the new technology on top, right? So how do you make that whole ecosystem work?
Absolutely. And a lot of those things have worked really well because they would do the same things over and over again.
Yeah.
But over the last few years, my goodness, the amount of change that every organization has had to go through, the scaling of that just on some of those legacy systems cannot handle the load, and it's just going to get faster. LLM, Gen AI, these things are moving very, very quick.
Right. So for our audience, LLM.
Oh, large language model, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Give me one bullet on that.
So the ability to use artificial intelligence to be able to harness the world's language and then use that as a way for us to create intelligence is what's sort of behind the ChatGPTs of the world. And so it's very powerful. Risks, challenges, concerns with it as well, but it will be a game changer.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rex. Okay, so Anuja, folks know Bell as where they get their cell phones and internet, right? But we're accelerating our tech transformation as well, right? Moving to becoming a tech services leader. Now you lead a massive team of software developers, application delivery, supporting Bell's network, essentially the backbone, right, to all of this. So talk to me about how this tech transformation is affecting not only your business, but also let's shift a little bit to the talent.
Sure. Some aspects of the transformation, I think both Utpal and Rex covered. There's the underlying technology transformation, right? You talked about, use of AI, cloud for scalability, and you talked about, moving away from legacy architecture to new that is scalable. Scale is a big thing, and flexibility are key things. I would say, if I think about the transformation as a whole, the connection we always make to transformation, especially as technology people, is technology, right? It's about using cloud, it's about using APIs, it's about using microservices. But really, I would say technology is just one aspect of it. There's a significant people and process transformation, because you can transform technology as much as you want. If you don't simplify the business processes around it, customers won't realize any benefits, right? So as technologies, that's the first thing I always say. Every person who works on technology needs to understand that it is to enable something for a customer, for an employee, and in our case, in case of Bell, it's technicians, right? They are the ones who actually make a service happen for our customers in many cases. So how do you look at this holistically from the point of view of technology, people, and process transformation? And if you think about digital technology, we all talk about its importance. Imagine the number of touch points an organization has in terms of launching a product service. Digital transformation is about everything end to end. You can digitize a technology and make it look good, but if your back office processes, for example, are still manual, there is only so much realization of technology. So this is where the connection to talent comes in, right? So yes, you need talent to work on the newer technologies as we simplify our architecture. I always say, for us, it is about making it simple and easy for our customers to use our service. As you talk about that, this is where some of the things that, complement technology, like Agile and DevOps, these become equally important. So these are the kind of things we are looking at. Otherwise, from the point of view of overall transformation, enterprise architecture, cloud, I think these are almost table stakes. Yeah. These are not even optional anymore for us.
Yeah, thank you. Rex mentioned something, but I actually want to ask Utpal this question. So Rex, when you were talking about your transformation, I was sort of having this image of multiple partners supporting you, right? Through the digitization, but the cyber, right? So organizations and their own internal IT departments are leveraging and partnering with a lot. So, but Utpal, you're in that role of partnering with organizations, customer-facing, consulting with companies. What are you seeing in terms of the shift of how a business kind of moves itself through this transformation? What are the partners they're relying on?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll break it into three parts. Part one, I think Anuja hit the nail on the head. It's not just technology. It's technology, people, and process. And as a service provider or as a technology provider, you need to understand that for your end customer, those things are absolutely essential and critical. So that's number one. The interplay of all of those three are absolutely critical. The second one is you can provide services and you can provide technology, but if you're not looking at it holistically from a DevOps standpoint, from a sprint standpoint, from an agile development standpoint, you need to make sure you are part of the customer's team, the client's team, to make that real vision happen. And then the third thing, which is very important, is your customer is a reflection of the global talent. So it's a diverse workforce, it's a global workforce. You need to make sure that the culture that the end customer has, you have the same values and the same customer so that you can nicely fit. So those are some of the things that I'm seeing as we support our customers globally.
Interesting. And so Anuja Rex, from our side, sort of from the organization side, reaching out to partners and leveraging, what are you seeing in that ecosystem?
Go ahead.
Well, I would say in a lot of the technologies in the application, a lot of it is an intelligence game. So let's take cybersecurity as an example. Cybersecurity, the more data, the more knowledge, the more intelligence you have, the better you are. If you confine yourself to the four walls of your organization, you're going to be fairly limited in your ability to be really good at cyber. And so working with partners and continuing to evolve and change that is, I would say, absolutely critical moving forward. And it's very difficult. So the transformation that we've talked about, sort of the process components, it's easy to say, but really hard to do. I'll give you a quick example. I met a team that did reporting, and you start to question the value of the reports. And at Rex, we're extremely important. Why are we important? Well, our reporting is able to identify that product in region A, we don't have enough of it. Customers are in huge demand. And we also know that we have so much extra product in region B. So if we move the product from region B to region A, we can satisfy the needs of the customers and reduce inventory costs. That's why this reporting is so important. The problem is, you don't need a report. Reports are glorified human interfaces to machines. Machines do not need reports. All of that could be completely automated, and the action could be executed with no involvement from people perspective. To see that, it's hard to ask the people doing reports, how would you change things? Right? And so having an outside-in perspective, understanding how people are doing things differently outside of industry, even completely different novel ways of technology, and sort of applying those kind of things gives you an opportunity to do things differently. So working with partners, with vendors, making sure that you're constantly thinking about what else is out there becomes important. Otherwise, you're confined again to the four walls of what you know.
Yeah. And I would say for us, I think you see the theme here, Angie. The pace of innovation, is mind-boggling. You think about, things get out, technologies get outdated so quickly. And so the change is constant. As the change is happening, the only way you adapt as an organization is being aware of what's coming up way ahead of time. So I think it's a necessity. If you have to be at the forefront of innovation, you absolutely have to be plugged into it, because we are a part of an ecosystem. The notion that a single organization can independently chart its own course for success, it doesn't work anymore. It's quite outdated. So as you're a part of an ecosystem, you have to, build that network of partners. And the other thing, I was just smiling when you talked about reporting. I think we all can relate to, teams telling, well, we do need to report. I think what becomes pretty apparent in this journey of digital transformation is, everybody needs to understand the concept of value that, a customer can realize. And so you have to question all the time, what's the value of what I do as an individual, what we do as a team, and what we do as an organization, because at the end of the day, the only, litmus test for value is, does the customer feel it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think taking that reporting example, right? It sounded like in your story, the people doing the reporting saw value, right? I can tell you a piece of information, but when you elevate that context into the customer impact, then you go, okay, but the value isn't there fully, and there's more opportunity if you automated it, right? We could get there faster. That's really interesting. So maybe if you touched on this, and I'm thinking about the people doing the reporting.
Yes.
Kind of looking at the, and we all love Excel. There's a lot of Excels that we use at work, right? So how do we let go of that? What's the transition that we need to support our people with?
You were directing that at me?
Yes, please.
Yeah, well, if I'm being controversial, I might make a statement like, IT is dead. And the idea there is that if you think about the role and the value that IT provides, it provided a value because in order to make something happen, you required specialization and expertise and knowledge. And so you needed people to be able to do some of those things. I remember learning to code in assembler language. I went into Pascal and BASIC and C++ and Java and all these kind of things. My next language for coding is called English, because it's just simplified now, and the need to have a specialist in so many different functions becomes non-necessary. And so if you think of disruption, I always think of disruption as really a way of disintermediating things. And so IT really only exists to perform a function that may be automated in a big way. So, not to shock folks, in terms of, my goodness, what are you saying? Is there no more IT functions? What about all these jobs and these kind of things? Is there a role? There is a role. And the way I see the evolution of IT and technology is that the role is different. It is not only are you being disrupted, you have the opportunity to be the disruptor. The ability, because just like IT is an intermediary, so is finance, so is HR, so is sales, so is everything. And so you need to think about, well, how do we change and how do we create value for the customer at the end of the day? The second thing that's going to be extremely important is around what I call integrity. So building technology is one thing. Building it with integrity is different. I'm talking scalability, security, sustainability, long-term thinking about application. Anuja talked about the importance of microservices and cloud capabilities and the reasons why those are so important. Without pushing that sort of integrity into your architecture design and having a long-term lens, you can create problems. And they could be near-term, they could be mid-term, or it could be long-term problems. And so technologists have a very important role of ensuring what are the guardrails, how do you establish integrity, how do you design things in the appropriate way, and how do you know when it's no longer relevant and you obsolete yourself?
Yeah.
So there's still a lot of functions, it's just shifts.
Yeah. So as a business functional owner, I'm feeling this conflict between we want the right architecture for longevity, sustainability, right? And so we don't have sort of isolated solutions. And then the urgency to deliver, right? The urgency to get something done because I know I can make it incrementally better. So I think that's, Anuja, you've helped mentor me on this topic before, right? So this notion of like increments, right? And sort of making incremental improvements to get to that North Star.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I would say back to Rex's point about, how do you stay ahead so that you know what's coming up and you're evolving. And this is where I think the connection with why you have to constantly be upskilling and reskilling becomes so important, because the roles are changing. What was relevant may not be relevant in the future. So how do you stay ahead in terms of even as leaders for your workforce, but also for employees, right? How do you understand what's coming up in terms of technology, and how do you stay ahead of it? Because, I would say the nature of jobs will always change as technology evolves. That's a given. There is no technology in my mind that I know of that has remained static,
right?
At least not in our industry. And so that is where, the focus on talent pipeline and the focus on, how do you continuously make sure that you have the right talent to solve these technology problems of the future, because the business will look at IT for very different set of things than they have had in the past.
Absolutely. So in doing research for this talk, I was reading an IBM article on the future workforce, and it talked about the half-life of skills, right? And so these technology skills that you're talking about, software development, AI, machine learning, right? They've got a half-life, of 2.5 years. And so that kind of constant reskilling, upskilling becomes even more important, right? So Paul, you've spoken on a few stages on the future of work. Maybe give us the summary. What are the imperatives on talent that you're seeing for the future?
Yeah, absolutely. Before I go over there, just to reiterate what Anuja and Rex were saying, what is important when you're working on technology and all of these is look at it from a lens of a business outcome. What is it that's going to drive a business outcome? Because the IT functions, the technology functions are a means to an end. Whether you're selling or delivering, it's easy to consume, easy to sell for your end customer, and technology is a means to an end. The thing that I always like is, and I always tell my team that Anuja just mentioned, you're never at a perfection. There's always something more you can do. So those are step functions. You need to constantly doing it, and the way to measure it through KPIs or local, whatever your performance measurements are. Back to your point on future of work, technology is going to evolve. And so if you think you've got all the skills, well, wait, till, again, something new comes up. So it's all about constant learning. In our business, whether we like it or not, it's all about constant learning. The skills and the kind of jobs that existed 20 years ago do not exist today. The jobs that are going to get, actually I'm working with a university trying to help prepare curriculum for the future of jobs in the engineering sector, and it's all about data science and AI experts and this and that. That's probably going to evolve in the next 5-10 years. So it's about constant learning. And then the second thing is you always have to look in your own area where you're working about what additional change can you do, because you're never perfect. And if you think you're the best, you can get disintermediated pretty fast. So it's all about step functions, it's all about keeping yourself current, and it's always about staying ahead of the competition. And if you think you're perfect, there would be someone over there who's probably working on something to create the next wave to overtake you.
Yeah. Rex, you look like you want to jump in on that.
Oh, I completely agree. And it reminded me of something I heard Jensen, the CEO of NVIDIA, recently say, which is you're either running to food or you're running to not be food. And it's but you got to run. You just got to keep going. And I totally agree. In terms of those critical skills, learning is the critical skill. Critical thinking and the ability to assess, and it's difficult when you're doing something to acknowledge that, hey, maybe there's something better. And so we do things like best practices, where we follow a set of processes and it becomes comfortable. And you don't even realize that what you're doing and how you're doing it no longer is the best way, and things change. And so it is difficult to stay on top, but it is absolutely the skills that you need for that future workforce.
For sure. I was just in a training a couple of years ago, and the instructor put up a slide, which, I use that so often with my team, and something along the lines that the literate of the 21st century are not those who can read and write, but those who can learn, unlearn, and relearn. And that is so true, because you have to unlearn, especially as you talk about managing a different workforce, or navigating technical talent, or even leadership has changed through the decades on the type of workforce you manage, so that the concept of unlearning and relearning becomes so important. And the other thing I would say, back to the point that Rex was making, is there is the technical capabilities, which absolutely, we need software developers and cybersecurity analysts and AI machine learning experts. But I would also say that, we need a complementary set of cognitive skills that are equally important, right? Because we said it's not only about technology, it's about how do you realize value of the technology. So if you think about the learning skill, the critical thinking skill, like can you think right off your feet, and can you take this disparate set of data and make sense out of it? That becomes equally important, right, in this, to really create that complementary skill sets.
So the skill of learning question, is it innate? Is it something you can nurture and grow, in your opinion? Any one of you?
I think you can learn it, and because I've seen it firsthand. And sometimes frameworks are helpful to just get people thinking in a certain way. And I recently spoke about dots and the idea of connecting dots and why it doesn't always happen. And so the first thing you need to do is you need to be able to see the dots. You don't see them if you're not looking for them, or if you're not in the right place to look for them. And so you have to position yourself to be in the right place to see the dots. And sometimes we don't realize that everything is a learning opportunity, and so we obliviously ignore what is right in front of us. Take, for example, this discussion about hybrid work or back in the office. And I'm not going to get to the specific example.
Don't go there.
But I will say, if you're physically around other people, you have more dots that become visible. And the more dots you have visible, the greater the potential opportunity now to connect dots. Sometimes very abstract. And sometimes we don't connect dots because we feel that, it's not my job, or that someone else is going to do it, or for whatever reason. So part of the second piece is, now that I see them, I got to connect it. I got to just do it. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Progress over perfection, incremental, and then you got to keep connecting dots, because you can make one dot connection, but hey, wait a second, what about this over here, and what about that? And we talked about ecosystems and how it becomes larger in that. And you don't stop there. After you've connected all the dots, you still have to paint the picture. You have to translate into business outcomes. You have to be able to articulate it in a way that it can be consumed and then ultimately drive the action towards what you need that organization to do. So see the dots, connect all the dots, paint the picture. And so that can be learned. And it's practice, practice, practice. And the more you do it, the better you become at it, like any other muscle.
Yeah, you want to add?
Yeah, actually, spot on. And the other thing I would say, I think Anunda touched upon that, cognitive. I would say the learning is also a soft skill learning. So we all can learn new technology, AI 1, AI 2, but it's also a soft skill that we need to evolve and grow. Understanding of your own limitations and the ability to learn, unlearn, and say, you know what? If I don't get to the skill, I may lose myself in the future from a skills perspective. The second thing that I'm very passionate about that I tell my team, it's a team sport. Yeah. If you run by yourself, you can only go so far. To Rex's point about scalability, putting integrity in scalability, resilience, it's a team sport. To go to that level where you can scale big time, you need a team. You need to be collaborative, be open to working in a team culture, and then more importantly, appreciating and respecting diversity of opinion. You can't be the most knowledgeable. You may think you may be the most knowledgeable person, but you have to appreciate and respect and hear the other point of view. And then many times there are team members who don't speak up. As a leader, you have to get them to speak because they may have the best ideas that nobody may have even brought forward. So I'm also a big passionate supporter of those soft skills because hard skills can be learned as we grow or as we evolve, but those soft skills are fundamental.
Absolutely. Nice.
The only thing I would add, absolutely both, soft skills, scaling, multiplier effect, and, how do you said it very well with team sport. I would also say, the best learning comes from being in the most uncomfortable places. Yeah. So how do you really get out of what you're comfortable with? And it's hard when you are, especially when you're starting off your career, because you want to be good at what you're doing. But back to your points, once you see the other side, when you connect the dots, it is a different kind of liberation. Yeah. Because suddenly you've taken what you know, you've taken what you've recently learned, and actually helped move yourself, your team, and your organization forward. So never underestimate that learning, and absolutely learning is acquired, it's not innate, right? You can acquire learning through practice, as you said. It's more so a mindset thing. Yeah. Can you put yourself in a place where you can always be uncomfortable because you don't know something, but because you have the learning mindset, you eventually get there.
But what you say resonates with me so much because, in my earlier days, you kind of pride yourself on having knowledge, right? Or mastering something, becoming the person someone might come to you with a question and you can answer it, right? So your recipe for success for me, was kind of built on building up my knowledge and experience and expertise on it, right? And this shift, as you say, to be comfortable with, I don't know. And I will just facilitate or ask questions or be curious, and that's my power, right? Like that's been a shift. It's taken me a while personally to kind of get there. So maybe Anuja, you're a very big supporter of Women at Bell and fostering the next generation of female leaders. So what's that advice that you might give to a younger Anuja?
Yes.
If you could talk to her
What
today.
I've learned, what I could have done differently.
Yes.
A couple of things. One, which we already covered a little bit, but I'll expand on it a bit further, is, raise your hand for stretch goals and stretch objectives. We can, you can be great at what you do as a subject matter expert, but if you have to learn more, you have to try things. And this is one thing that, I learned through my career, especially is true with progressive organizations like Bell, is that people take chances on you based on your potential, not necessarily your experience alone, right? And keep that in mind. I remember when, I had to seek out new roles in the earlier days, I would always say, can I do everything this role needs? But honestly, you know, you're learning, and this is where the learning skills and your capabilities, and that's why, you know, think about potential. There are absolutely roles in which experience is necessary, given the nature of what needs to be delivered. So I'm not saying experience is not important, but there is a fine balance. So I would say, you know, raise your hand for the stretch goals, be uncomfortable, you know, because you will learn a lot out of it. The second thing I would say is, you know, don't underestimate the importance of networking and mentorship. You know, I can speak for myself, coming as an engineer by training, the concept of networking was very difficult because there was this self-imposed, you know, call it a bias or saying, you know, I'm imposing on somebody, you know, I don't want to take up anybody's time. But if you think about it, you know, it's a community, right? You learn from somebody. There's this concept of reverse mentorship. People learn from you, and you know, get comfortable with that. So, you know, if you don't have a mentor, go seek a mentor. It took me a while. I was nudged in that direction, saying that maybe you should get a mentor, and I can't tell you how much I've benefited from that. And now, you know, I'm a mentor to a lot of women at Bell, and I learned something from them. So, you know, don't underestimate the value it brings, and, you know, get over if you have a bias against it. And the third one I would say is, you know, be your authentic self. I know it's an overused term, but think about, you know, we talk about diversity of thinking, diversity of opinion, you know, bring your authentic self, because diversity of opinion matters. You know, I think about a couple of decades ago, when we spoke about diversity, it was spoken about from the point of view of it's morally the right thing to do. It is about fairness, it's about equity. You know, we moved past that. It's the right thing to do because innovation needs diversity of thinking. So if you know, again, that's an undisputable fact. It's not because the New York or Rex say so. You know, there are studies that show that. So bring your authentic self to work, you know, because your authentic self is always your best self, right?
Yeah.
So you have to start somewhere.
Nice. Rex, you want in on this?
Wow, I mean, you know, we could be talking for a long time. This is just such a wonderful opportunity, and you know, a couple things sort of jumped out at me. One was around the concept of discomfort, and I'm so glad you raised it. And you know, one of the things I found interesting is that based on various metrics and sort of ways we've thought about performance in the past, it actually goes counter to allowing for discomfort, sort of what you were talking about. And so we pride ourselves on saying, well, you know, let's get a really high collaboration score on an employee survey. What could be the problem there is that if everybody is in their own world and no one bugs anybody else and we're all happy and we're all doing our own thing, we're not really collaborating, but I'm going to score, yeah, things are great, things are good. When you have discomfort, it may feel awkward, it may feel difficult. Somebody may be challenging your ideas, not you, but your ideas. And that may make you feel uncomfortable. There was a study done at Northwestern back in the 80s where they had groups of people solve a problem. They injected an outsider, someone who was different, and they scored better, but they scored themselves as being worse. They thought they performed worse. Yeah. And so what was interesting here is even though the outcomes were better, they felt they did worse.
Because it feels uncomfortable.
It was uncomfortable, right? So that discomfort piece is such an important component, I think. So, I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I would say if I was a junior Utpal, a couple of things that I would have done differently. I think a lot of the stuff Rex and Anuja have hit on it. I think number one, many years ago when I started, and by the way, thank you for mentioning Northwestern, because I went to Northwestern, so I really love that. I was happy in what I was doing. So getting out of your comfort zone and trying to understand more of the business was important. So I was in my own little department. But if I have to give something to folks from today, it's like seek out the other parts of your organization so you understand the broader business. That's very important, because if you are able to work in different departments of a large organization, the sooner you understand the business, the even better it is. Number two, constant learning. And learning is not just technical learning, it's technical, it's business, it's soft skills, it's team collaboration. You have to be a team player. And then the third piece, which is very important, is mentoring. Again, mentor people with a different backgrounds, global mentoring. Mentor people who are many levels below you, because the ones who are fresh graduate from university, I actually learned the most from them.
Yeah.
They reach out to me for mentoring, but actually I'm happy because I'm learning from them. So it's just wonderful.
Absolutely. Just your first point about learning about the broader business context. Give our audience a practical tip. How do they do that? How do they learn?
I think, again, back to Anuja's point, get out of your comfort zone. You have to start building networks, and then you have to start reaching out, or at least understanding what that other area or what that other department does. For example, if you're on a technology side, understand what the finance side of the organization does. Understand what the sales side of the organization does. Understand what the services are, what the, if you have a business enterprise, understand what they're doing. And you don't have to know everything yourself. You can start reading it. You can start going to your company's website. You can start looking at the internal. But then after a while, do make an effort trying to understand and potentially reach out for jobs in that area, because there are a lot of internal postings. But you have to make the effort, and you have to get out of the comfort zone. And obviously, as Anuja said, it's priceless if you're able to get some great mentors. I mean, it's just amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes, Angie, learning about business is as simple as asking questions.
Yes.
Start with the why. And I always use this term with the team. It's about humble inquiry. I really want to know more. I'm not challenging, but I really want to understand more, because, a lot of people who work in a technical world don't work in a vacuum. You always have a business partner you're working with. Take the time to understand, what purpose is your technology serving? There are projects and there are requirements. You can go and start coding based on the requirements, or you can say, hey, what customer problem are you trying to solve? What features are you giving? So sometimes it is very simple in what you see your role as, right? Back to Rex's point, we can all sit in our cubicles and do our thing, and everything can be green, but are you really advancing the agenda? It comes to that, humble inquiry, ask the questions from the point of view of learning. And expect the same other way. If you're being challenged, if you see it's being challenged, always see it as an opportunity to teach somebody about what you're doing.
Yeah. The way you said it is so important, I think. Humble inquiry. And it's almost that first baby step, right? I think to learning is getting comfortable with, I'm just in a learning mode. And I've talked to people who will say, I didn't want to ask that question because I didn't want to seem dumb, right? They said LLM and I didn't know what it meant, and we just kept going, right? So it's okay to pause and say, I want to learn more about that. I think it's also framing it in the way that you did it beautifully, right? Is I want to learn more. Not what, that doesn't make sense to me, but it's more, I want to learn more. I think it's a very open-ended, open to possibilities kind of way to have a conversation.
Yeah, and there's an organization, remember, at the end of the day, this is all possible because an organizational culture has to enable that. It's okay for us to say, be bold and raise your hand and, question. But if there is a complementary culture that doesn't support, so for those, that are listening to us right now, if you are in a leadership role, create that culture where people are comfortable saying, I want to know more, or even I disagree, right? How do you get comfortable with disagreeing as a group? And, at the end of the day, the best idea needs to win, no matter where it comes from. Right. But a culture is so important. It's a prerequisite in making this work.
Okay, if you all apply for jobs in HR, we'll get great job. Okay, so maybe some questions from the audience. So we've got some chat going on, and I don't know if my producers can scroll it up. We've got a few. So first question, how does technology change the landscape of business competition?
I can start and just give you my perspective on it. I think with the advances in technology, the barriers to entry have come down in so many ways. Your ability to go from zero to hero
Right.
is so fast.
Oh,
You can
yeah.
also go from hero to zero so fast. And so because of that, you have hyper competition that will occur. And resting on your laurels and being first isn't good enough. You have to, it's one thing to be first, it's another thing to stay first. Much, much harder to do. And so the business competition perspective will come from all different angles. I think what you see a lot of these days is that no one constrains themselves to a single thing that I do. Bell doesn't just give you, a dial tone, right? Canadian Tire, our brand purpose is about making life in Canada better. That's not about selling products or giving services. It expands the opportunity of what we could do because we're that trusted brand. And so you'll see, as you already have with other organizations, people will expand in very different things, and they're not confined to an industry vertical. They're confined based on, well, what can I do with the assets I have? How do I service my customer in ways? And so you'll see more of that, I believe, because technology has made it that you can do that.
Right. And then that notion of value.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you anchor it all back to value.
Yeah, technology is an equalizer from that perspective, right? Everybody has access to cloud, right? Think about some of the underlying technologies, right? As technologies become standard, really your secret sauce needs to shift, right? What is it where the value is being created? Absolutely.
And a great example is Uberization, right? I mean, there was no Uber a few years ago, and the technology, because of technology, the concept of Uber and how it has basically transformed that particular service industry is just, and to the point that Rex and Anuja mentioned, it's an equalizer. No longer do you need significant amount of dollars like a large organization to disintermediate a particular business model. So technology is changing the landscape, technology are changing the business models, and as an organization, you have to look at it from a customer lens. How do you make it easy for the customer? Because there would be a technology, could be someone in a basement building a technology which can overtake you, right?
Yeah.
So,
And your inefficiencies get exposed in that model. Suddenly. And
The transparency,
yes,
right?
absolutely.
Is just like
And you
uber
realize the
transparency.
speed of decision making and collaboration becomes so important in that world.
Yeah, okay, good. Next question. What are the weakest links in our technological capabilities?
weakest links.
I can take a crack. Whether you call it a weakest link or what is critical is people, right? And this is where the point about talent comes in. You have to, bring in new talent. You have to nurture talent. You have to reskill, upskill, because everything we tie to innovation, only is possible if you have the right people, right? And people from the point of view of skills, absolutely, but also the organizational culture, right? So you need the right culture, you need the right people and the skill set, because that is almost a predictor of success in technology, right?
I would say the weakest link would be, just a little repetitive of Anuja, the culture in the organization, the leadership. If the leadership in the organization believe they've got everything figured out, their technology is the best, well, good luck, because things can change. So I think one of the weakest links is the kind of culture within an organization, whether it supports new innovation, whether it supports ideas, is it creating a certain kind of separate startup lab environment to keep on trying newer and different things? Because if you think that your current technology and infra landscape or whatever is the best, well, that's probably going to be, is probably the biggest, weakest link for that organization.
Right, good.
If I could just,
Rex.
I don't know if I would call it the weakest link, but another challenge around sort of technology and embracing that would be archaic operating models that constrain the way we do things and how we operate. One of the biggest ones, and Anuja hit this earlier as well, is the idea of projects. So a project by definition has a start and an end, and unfortunately the end really isn't the real value. And so if you think about it in a product mindset and continuous, you're always looking to further advance it. And so where this becomes problematic is we reward people to make bad decisions. So we've made, for example, say, it's not worth automating my testing on some solution I'm building because it's going to take longer to automate it. The problem is I'm going to run that test multiple times. But if I think narrowly about it, and the project has forced me to save money and go faster, then I might do something that's not really good long-term for an organization. Accounting and how we've always thought of OpEx versus CapEx is another great example. That
Again, don't go there.
It will constrain how we think about things, and we may make decisions that could be extremely innovative and not do them because of accounting as opposed to the opportunity.
And as you're talking, I'm picturing this ecosystem of an org and how it has to be so in sync, right?
Yeah.
So all parts of your org, your budgeting, your HR, how performance management is done, how hiring, everything has to be so in sync and paced, right, to achieve this outcome. Yeah. Okay, good. So we've got a little bit of time. I'm going to spring something on you. It's a lightning round. I'm going to give you 2 seconds to answer. Okay, so Rex, you can have lunch with one person, dead or alive. Who is it?
My mom.
Your own?
Yeah.
Awesome, good answer. Okay, Anuja, what's the next training course you're going to take?
The next, I'm actually, this is a good question because I just registered for it, is, commercializing innovation.
Oh, okay, good. And Utpal, if you couldn't be in tech for some reason, what role would you be in?
I was always fascinated with medicine. So I grew up in a family where we had quite a few doctors. So if it was not tech, I probably would have been a doctor. Because I think I have a dozen in my family, extended family, who are all in the field of...
Amazing.
Yeah.
And no doubt you would have brought technological innovation to it, yeah.
Hopefully.
Okay, I was going to give you bonus points if you said HR, but yeah, oh well. All right, well, thank you very much for this conversation, Rex and Anuja and Utpal. I think the time flew by. I'm secretly hoping for a podcast series out of this, so hope you're available. Some really important themes that I'm going to try to remember that I'm taking away is, humble curiosity, right? Like that learn to learn notion is so important. I think the other really big point is this ecosystem on so many levels, right? So business ecosystem, organizational ecosystem, personal ecosystem of like you only see so many dots, right? With your context, it's limited, and we have to accept that we're limited.
Absolutely.
Right? And so this humility to know that it's limited, you can't know everything, you can't be perfect, you're not at the, the number one on the earth of something. So this accepting that there must be others, there must be people that can bring me more context. So yeah, I'm taking away this notion of sort of this meta ecosystem and then a very personal ecosystem. So really powerful. I love how connected we were naturally. So it tells you there's some really important consistent themes, right? Sure. Awesome. So thank you, audience. We felt your energy. We felt your questions coming through. We wish we were live, but we reach more of you across this country by doing this virtually. Thank you again to Ascend Canada and to Bell for bringing us together today. And again, skills development and talent strategy have to be front and center. The tech revolution is indeed upon us with more urgency and more of a compelling focus. So together, we will thrive. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.